Hey, this has been kind of a long time coming, to say the least. I've been wanting to talk about this album for a long time. Not going to get into why I didn't at first. All I'm going to say is I'm sorry I didn't, because I felt a lot of guilt that I didn't, because there's one album I wanted to talk about for the longest time to preach the gospel of more so than anything else. It would be this one. This is Cobra Antic by Crab Action. I already talked about their first album, which is really good, and my opinion, of course, still stands on it. The reason I want to talk about this album so much, so it came out, I think, early in 2020, if I recall correctly, maybe 21, maybe 2021. The point is, a fairly long while ago, to say the least. And I'm just gonna say right up front, without any hyperbole or hesitation in my mind, I've really contemplated this for the longest time. I am fairly certain at this point that this is one of the best, if not one of the absolute best, straight up rock or metal, punk, any kind of anything under the rock spectrum albums released in the past at least a decade, maybe a decade and a half, maybe even 2 decades. This album is absolutely fantastic. Uh, my only sort of barrier for you might not like this album is it's just if you're not into the style, it's very like fun kind of party rock. It's not your straight ahead metal sort of trying to sound intimidating or dark at all. These guys have no sort of interest in doing that. It's just very fun, in your face, loud rock music. But that being said, if you're willing to, if assuming that you are okay with the style, which is almost like a pointless barrier to bring up, because it's like, well, if you don't like jazz, you're probably not gonna like this masterpiece modal jazz record. But is that really the album's fault? I don't think so. This album, any qualms I had, however minor they were with their first album, are completely obliterated on this. First of all, the sound quality, the production, the recording and mixing is just such a step up from the first one. The first one, of course, all the songs punched really well and they were arranged very well. Like the music was super solid, but the mixing was a bit uh, drowned out, especially the singer Nat King Cruel or Grant's uh, vocals are kind of buried. That issue is completely obliterated on this. Every single instrument, actually, it's not just the vocals are louder, so it's better. No, 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 no. Every single instrument has its place in the mix, and that you never get lost in it. But it's never too sterile. It's everything kind of comes together in the most lively way possible. And so yeah, the mixing, it sounds great. Like the tones of everything are great. It's nice and grimy, but not too harsh on the ears to the point where it's hard to listen to. It just feels right when you blare this thing out on some loudspeakers or whatever, right? And what more could you want from a rock album? Well, I'll tell you what else you could get. A shockingly solid, consistent track list. This album has 11 songs, and there are 11 good songs on it. What? It's ridiculous, there's not. I actually, this is one of the harder albums I've had a time with picking my favorite track or my least favorite, even. Anytime I try and pick ones that you know, I still can't fault it for the sort of epic, the sort of epic nature they're going for. I really can't poke any holes in this album, and I've been trying. I don't want to just come across as a one-dimensional kind of praising this album, but there's only so much other dimensions you can explore when you have an album like this. It's really freaking good. You should listen to it. This this in a perfect world, I don't see a reason why this shouldn't be revered. I mean, you take a great album and you put great music on it. Obviously, we don't live in a perfect world, so uh, it's not gonna it's not gonna poke through to a lot of other people who have that barrier up of not being into rock or not being aware of this band or not wanting to dabble with bands that are sort of more straightforward. And believe me, I'm actually not super into I wouldn't even rope them into this category, but like that kind of like, I've heard some people call it pizza rock or pizza party metal, something like that. Just like we're just here to have a good time and write some silly songs about aliens and pizza. Because, I don't know, to me personally, I feel like it usually just comes across as a bit lackluster, to say the least. But the difference here is that the songs are actually just straight up fun. There's never like they're making up. They're making up for a poor song by just being like, well, we're just doing it for fun. It's like, no, the songs are super solid. The arrangement's great. The lyricism on a lot of these are very surprisingly abstract and more complex than you would think. There's even some inspiration taken on one track, the third track, "The Golden Door," another fantastic song. See why I'm not mentioning like specific songs as highlights? The reason why is just because they're all highlights as far as I'm concerned. So I'm not just like, oh, the first few tracks are good, because then I'd be like, well, no, every track's good. I want to mention everything, you know. But back to the lyrics, some of them on the third track are taken from a work by Emma Lazarus. I'm reading it off the back here. Emma Lazarus, called "The New Colossus." And I'm not a hoity-toity enough sort of figure to be like, oh, I've read that work, or I'll admit I'm not. But to be honest, I totally could have bought that they were all written by the band, because I had a lot of these lyrics, you know, they seem simple on the surface, but you dig deeper and re-listening to the songs on this, which I have done because the songs are just naturally re-listenable. Then I'm like, oh, these lyrics are they're really hard hitting. They're really inspiring. And of course, a lot of them are just fun. You know, I'm not going to act like Crab Action versus Skynet is the deepest literary work of the past 20 years, although I would love to. But, you know, I'm not going to joke around. I don't want to joke around when talking about this album, because I don't want to make it seem like I'm being sarcastic or hyperbolic in any way. This is absolutely a fantastic work. Every single band member is just hitting it out of the park on every track. It's a hard album to talk to about in terms of highlights, because there are no highlights. It's just a consistently great experience from front to back. But the album still, it's not just like, okay, every song sounds the same. It's the lead singer, Nat King Cruel's, or Grant's, vocal delivery is very consistent. There's never a moment when he's not on 10 throughout the whole album. He's just very forceful and loud the whole way through, but in a cool way, in that cool classic kind of rock ethos way. But every single song has its own vibe. It has its own place. Like any good album that is sequenced well should. It has its own beat, in like a story beat or a beat change in a film or a narrative work. Each song kind of has the own beat change that it introduces. I know this is sort of basic stuff for like a music critic to mention when mentioning albums, but this album just gets all the basics right, which not a lot of albums do. You know, not every album's trying to accomplish the same thing, but after listening to this, I'm like, why not just every album try and accomplish the same thing, right? Every single band member, I'm just reading them off the back here. Nat King Cruel, vocals, like I said, on 10 the whole time, but never losing the conviction. It's always super committed, always super involved, funny at times. You know, it's fun to sing and shout along to, because it's just, how can you not? But never boring. Never even close to being boring or generic. The Unnameable Horror, aka Lloyd, on drums. Again, super great. I think is really responsible for giving each song the punch necessary. Each song its own vibe. It's just the drums. The guitar work by Broccoli Killbush and Boozeworm, both the guitars, again, really cool. It's some of the really awesome guitar harmonies and just interplay between the two that really gives the songs more of a full sound. Speaking of adding fullness, you got Gygax Icehammer on the bass. Phenomenal, just really great stuff. Each of the bass players that I feel they've had, I don't know how many, but I know they've had at least 2, maybe 3. I could be totally misremembering if they have 2 or 3, but at least 2 that I know of. And No, just great job. Great job. Again, it's like a third guitar, but not forgetting the role in the band of the bass. Just everything just comes together super well, and a lot of it is the mixing, but I'm sure a lot of it is just, when you write good songs, you should write them, you should arrange them while you're writing them and mixing them, so to speak, while writing them, where every instrument has its moment to shine, and but it never feels like, oh, we're doing a bass solo now and get a guitar solo, second guitar solo, drum solo. It just feels like a continuous flow of the work. So yeah, I cannot recommend this album enough. Seriously, give it a try. Even if you don't like rock, maybe not if you don't like rock, because this is very much a top tier execution of like a rock album with elements of like metal and punk. It's just absolutely fantastic. Songs are great, performances are great, production's great, the flow of everything is great. I have no qualms with this. I seriously want to one day find complaints about this album, and I can't. Favorite track, again, I can't pick one. If I had to pick between a couple, I'd say maybe Crab Foo, The Golden Door, I Am a Rat, Crawl has grown on me a lot. It's a great track. But really, it's every song. Like all those other songs that I didn't mention, like That's How I Use Gasoline and Betrothed to the Frost Giant's Daughter. All those other songs, I don't think of them as less. I'm just like, well, in terms of ones I want to re-listen to right now. But I'm going to be honest, if I'm going to re-listen to this, I'm just going to re-listen to the whole thing front to back, because it's that solid and consistent of experience. I cannot recommend this album enough. If you are a classic rock fan, if you're a dad, I recommend it. If you're kind of a metalhead, if you're a jerk metalhead and you're like super, closed-minded to a lot of stuff. Not saying that all metalheads are by any means, but they exist out there. And if you're, any fan of music can be. But if you're in a metal, I think you'll really enjoy this. If you're in a punk, I think you'll really enjoy this. If anything in the rock aggressive music spectrum, but you're still willing to put up with the labors of having to have melody and structure in your songs, then I think you'll really get a kick out of this, to say the least. I can only hope that you enjoy this album as much as I do. Show a lot of support for the band Crab Action. They've been doing this for a while. They recently had their 10-year anniversary, or Crabniversary, something like that. Don't remember how they spelled it, but they've been doing it for a while, and you can tell. You can tell that these guys are seasoned. They've been playing their instruments and playing in bands for a while. They get the dynamics of it all. These are pros, Whether or not you've heard of them, it doesn't matter. They know what they're doing, and they want to assault your eardrums. So please listen to this album as soon as possible.